Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Hopefully there's lots of people out there listening. Unfortunately, we can't see you, but I'm trusted that there's people there. So I will keep talking. I have a lot of presenters here. So if nothing else, there's 8 of us. And the other 7 are going to be taking you through some interesting topics this afternoon. Firstly, by way of a quick introduction, my name's Steve Osborne, and I'm a director at the Aurora Ceres Partnership, and we are food innovation management consultants and technology scouts. So I'm sort of considering myself to be reasonably well placed to be chairing today's session, which is about food futures, emerging trends and ingredients, and particularly in sustainable product development. And not surprisingly, this is going to sort of focus around the explosion in demand for plant-based and meat-based alternatives and how these have catalyzed innovation and NPD across the whole of the sector over the last sort of few years. And this session is going to sort of focus on those emerging trends and some of the new ingredients that are contributing to shaping that future. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time chatting. I'm trusting you're all listening. I'm going to introduce our first presenter for the day, or the first 2 presenters, and they are Ulla Strom and Bertrand Georgi. Ulla is a food engineer at Tetrapak and is a food technologist working across the Product Development Centre in Lund in Sweden, and has been working at Tetrapak for 15 years, and particularly in herbal medicine development and formulation. Ulla is responsible for running product trials, planning, executing, reporting, the whole project management piece, and to make sure that that knowledge transfer and learning is happening, and is also responsible for internal projects and supporting the innovation ecosystem, and a particularly important part of that. So I'm going to also introduce Bertrand Georgi, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Tebrito. Bertrand is an insect entrepreneur. I'm surprised there hasn't been a new word formulated for an insect entrepreneur, an insectopreneur, perhaps. And he supports stakeholders across the whole of the value food chain, and focusing particularly on alternative protein applications and organic fertilizer. Bertrand's a big believer in the food value chain and how it can be more efficient and more sustainable, and that using insects can really catalyze that scalability and making that as a available biomass. That this is a really sort of urgent need, particularly focusing on climate smart alternatives and quality proteins going forward for the future, and to feed the whole of the supply chain from fish and right through to food applications, and benefiting from the insect's rich protein and amino acid profile. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to Ulla and Bertrand, who are going to take you through their particularly interesting case study around sustainable ingredients. Ulla, Bernard, Bertrand, take it away.
You're muted, Ulla.
So, thank you, Steve. My name is Ulla Strom. I work for Tetrapak, so one of the largest processing and packaging companies present at 160 different markets. I'm based in Sweden, Lund, and I'm very excited to be here today with Bertrand from Tebrito.
Yeah, likewise, it's quite an honor for a very young startup, because to be alongside a large and established corporate like Tetrapak is fantastic. And maybe Tebrito deserves a few words of introduction, because we are a bit younger. As you hear from my voice, I'm French, but Tebrito is a Swedish company. We have a small pilot plant in the middle of Sweden, and the whole idea behind Tebrito is to provide the food and beverage industry with climate smart alternative proteins, and for that we use insects to act as catalysts on biomass that they convert into protein application. Basically, we use brewer's paint grain, discarded vegetables, or side streams from the cereal industry. This is quite a well-established business model, but Tebrito is taking that model a bit further because we have a quite unique protein extraction process, and we can obtain a 90% protein pure ingredient that can be used directly into food, because that wouldn't, so to say, give a taste or a smell to the applications. And this is how actually we came into contact with Tetrapak slightly more than a year ago now.
Yes. So Tetrapak, we have targeted insects as part of our ongoing scouting for alternative proteins technology. And because of the presence in the food and beverage industry with more sustainable and nutritious protein alternative, that's the reason. And when we were looking for the startups, we had a few things in mind that we wanted to investigate. How would the protein behave when it goes into the production line? How would the end product be like when it comes to mouthfeel, protein content, achievable, and nutritional attributes? And at that time, two different insect protein caught our attention. It was the mealworms and also the crickets. And we started to test crickets because I think we were attracted to the fact that the neutral nutty flavor would make good in applications, and also that it was something that we thought were more easy to start with. But in our trials, we were looking at protein drinks, and unfortunately, we were not really satisfied with the taste and the texture of that ingredient in the end product. So at that time, we have had contact with Tebrito, and we had heard that they had a really high quality protein powder. So we turned to them and asked to start cooperating with them.
I mean, if I may comment on that, Ola, because for us it was the beginning of this relationship. It was the first time for us that we were collaborating with a large corporate, and it was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, because in the very beginning we were quite surprised to be scouted. We did not expect anything, so we went there in Lund to pitch in front of a few senior profiles, so that was a bit intimidating. And then I mean, it's almost a black box. I mean, you don't really know what the large company is looking for. You're not really sure what you can brag about, and then at the end another company was selected. So I mean, we were still a bit proud, and that was fine. And then at some point you came back to us because apparently the quality, was so important that our mealworm ingredient was the most relevant, and that was such a fantastic confirmation for us, because as a young startup we had some lab results, even if we've run a metric batch. So it was starting to be a bit of volume, but we didn't know how the product was behaving. We needed this expertise, this kind of interaction with the food specialist and profiles like yourself, Fula, to get the feedback and to get the confirmation that we were on the right track. And that has very profound implications for us, because as I said, the normal route for an insect startup is to be active on the feed segment and just do some bioconversion. And for us, understanding that our added value, this protein extraction process, is an enabler on the food market, then helps us sharpen our strategy and go further in the development. So this little bump and this feedback about the relevance of the quality was extremely important for us. So that was the...
Yeah, thank you. I will share a little later about the experience we had with the protein, but the way we see it is that at this point we think that insect-based products are interesting for athletes, flexitarians, and the older population, for example. And those three demographic groups are key. So they're looking for a sustainable and qualitative protein, and that's why we see insect protein as a perfect fit for that. And for our customers, of course, safety is the first priority. But furthermore, we need to be able to process and pack this insect protein in the most efficient way. And then as consumer welcome more insects as part of the diet, food application knowledge is vital to be able to support customers in formulation and to deliver different types of production lines. And this helps our customers delivering different types of insect products to the market. It could be beverages, ice cream, cheese, who knows in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, it's slightly different because, as Steve was mentioning in the introduction, we really are aware of our role in the food value chain. So what we believe is highly relevant and important is to be humble and remain what we are. We are primary producers, and what we can do well in that role is to be role models in terms of hygienes and processes, protocols, but also being very transparent and guarantee traceability for consumers, because it's an industry that needs to take off, so to say. So what we see on this picture, basically, with your equipment in the middle, between the raw material or the ingredient that we provide and the product that you make possible to produce, I think it's a good illustration on where we meet and where we collaborate.
Yeah. Talking about meeting, we wanted to meet and to do those trials together, but now in the times of the pandemic, we need to find other ways to solve this. Even though we are Sweden-based, both of us, it's not easy to had not been easy to meet over the last years now. And our product development center in Sweden, Lund, is one of 10 product development centers within the Tetrapak organization. And we like to welcome customers to us in order to work with them at our PDC and to be able to taste and see and smell everything. And we are doing doing trials with the customer in place. But now with the pandemic, we have instead gone over to a virtual way to work. So we have installed cameras everywhere, so we can see what everybody's doing and all the machines and inside the mixes, and also to be able to share data in a good way, so the customer can feel that when they are doing trials with us, they are almost there. There are, of course, some limitations when it comes to taste and feel the mouthfeel and so, and then we need to send samples. And this is what we do day out and day in our PDC in Lund together with customers to support the sales of our machines, processing and filling machines, but also doing quite a lot of new product development work, both Mostly it is customers coming to us doing it, but sometimes we also are interacting as in this case. And we have a small video that we would like to show that is showing this a little bit. Please play.
Welcome to travel-free product trials at Product Development Center in Lund, Sweden, where customers can experience a product trial through live video, real-time process data and laboratory data. A travel-free trial gives more value to the customer, who can participate in the live trial from anywhere, securing that everyone is always in the right place at the right time. The PDC facilities includes mixing and UHT area, laboratory, filling area. The trial leader is a food technologist who interacts with the customer via headset, which allows for input and discussions. One of our process specialists acts as audio video director, running a video studio to give the best experience by mixing real-time video and data. Travel-free trials promote sustainability by minimizing travel and emissions, while improving collaboration.
Thank you so much. That was a word from my manager, and this is something that we've been trying to use in the cooperation with Bertrand and Tebrito. I don't know what is your experience, Bertrand?
I mean, for us, it was only positive for multiple reasons. First, we are an impact-driven company. And seeing that we can find solutions to minimize travel and emissions to the bare minimum, that was quite good. Second, of course, working with a very large organization for us was a bit unsettling, but seeing that you were so agile and able to adapt so fast to maintain the project and the pilot going, that was great. But the main thing was about beyond the technology solution and the practicalities. It was about the valuable feedback that we got, the openness and collaboration. Because for us, I mean, the result has been attained long ago when we saw, okay, now we have a stable ingredient, the functional properties are maintained, the amino acid profile is in par with beef. It's a fantastic product, but we didn't know, we could not assess what are the elements that are, so to say, affecting the product behavior in an application. And getting this feedback almost live was fantastic. So that was only a positive experience for us, for sure.
Thank you so much for those words.
Sure.
I think you also have some words to share about the EU approval and
yeah, absolutely.
What's happening here with insects.
Sure. I assume that from a food interested audience, you might have seen some information about the regulatory developments around insects, because it's labeled as a novel food for the EU. That was the meaning of the Novel Food Act back in 2016. And the first species of insect that was authorized as food within the EU was mealworms a few months ago. So that's obviously very positive, not just for us, but in a wider sense, because it's a very positive development for the whole food chain from feed to food. Now, when we talk about the powder, the product that we've been presenting and illustrating in this presentation, and that is being used in the product trials, it's a bit of a different product because it's post-processed, and this is still not authorized. It needs a bit more regulatory development, but we are extremely confident that this will come relatively soon, just because insect protein is clearly identified in the EU Green Deal, and that's the way developments have been occurring in the last years. So this is I'm sorry, there is an interruption on the screen. Sorry, hopefully you still hear me. Yeah, so I was just trying to say that the post-process applications are not authorized yet, but that should be the case within 1-2 years, probably.
Yes, and then we want to be ready when that is done, so we know how insect protein works. And we've been working with dairy proteins for ages now. And over the last 5-10 years, the vegetable proteins has exploded, and we have looked into doing all kind of products of vegetable proteins, things and yogurts and ice creams and so on. But insect protein is totally new for us, and to be able to go into this field and learn, it's, I think, a great way to start working with a startup like Tebrito for both of us to explore this area. And so far, the learnings we have done, we have tried to do some products, and for example, we worked a little bit with broth, and then we worked also with a oat-based product that was enriched with insect protein. And we saw that the sensorical quality of the insect protein is crucial, especially working in a liquid matrix, because all the flavors comes out much more than if you work in a dry matrix. Because if you put it in a bar or so, then it's not as important as if you would put it in a drink with the sensorical quality of the starting material. And it's tricky to solubilize the mealworm proteins at the start. Just heat and high shear mixing is not enough. We saw that homogenization is the key to get a stable product. And when getting it into solution, it becomes very stable. And it's for that point, it surpasses a lot of the vegetable proteins that more easily will separate and go to the bottom in a product like that, and excellent stability, and also very nice mouthfeel. So it works really nice when you know the tricks to incorporate it into the product. And we wanted to create a food product that works well with the insect protein, stable, nutritional, nice taste, and so on. And then it's a great way to work with Tebrito and get their high quality protein.
And if I may comment, Ole,
yes.
For us that was fantastic to get a lot of valuable feedback. But if I may share an anecdote, it was also I think the best confirmation for us was that you were feeling confident enough to test that drink with someone a bit special in your organization, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. We had a visit of our CEO in Tetrapak, and he of course wanted to see what new we had worked with at the PDC. So we had then developed an oat-based mocha beverage that was enriched with 2% mealworms, and I was really satisfied with that. So our CEO, he tried it and shared the feedback internally later, and that was really a good experience.
That for us, that's obviously a great anecdote, and we're very, very proud to share that. But obviously, the most interesting aspect for us is to understand from your expertise and your qualitative feedback the behavior of the product, and that we are not just producing a kind of Formula One to drive in town. that there is a need for this quality, that there is a purpose and a meaning to the investment that we make, and to basically the business plan that we have, because all our business idea is to take insect protein from field to fork to make it a food product, and from what we're getting from you, make it a food product requires some quality and potentially animal protein, because insect protein is an animal protein source, has some different behavior from green protein, and I'm certainly not advocating for some competition or which is best, because we need a mix of alternative proteins to rebalance the way we produce and consume protein. But this qualitative information is extremely important for us. So we've been really thrilled of this collaboration.
Yeah, and what do you see next, Bertrand, after this?
For us, I mean, it's still the same kind of attitude to remain open to our ecosystem. There is a lot of interest, curiosity, mixed feelings around insect protein. So we are not short of potential projects, collaboration possibilities. So for us, it's very important to still remain very open, both upstream and downstream, for sure. But the most pressing priority now is to scale up in terms of volume, to make this a quite well-controlled industrial process, and make the product available to experts like you, to make that a product that is appealing to consumer.
Yeah, we also look forward to the continuous collaboration and this learning journey with you in Tebrito, and we, as food industry and consumers increasingly welcomes this insect protein. Of course, there are some barriers still with the legal and some also with this relish that some people may experience. But we think that with this product, it's possible to do end product that are really nice, and that people would like to buy. So, and we want to build knowledge in this application that is really outside our core. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ola. I want to congratulate you and myself in the same time, because we hold the time, and I'm very happy with that.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much, and yes, congratulations for staying within the time. I always think it reflects well on me as a chair if you're able to do that. So appreciate that. And thank you both. That was really quite interesting to sort of hear that personal relationship that's developed over what has really been quite a challenging time to develop products. And we have got a couple of questions that have come through that I will pose to you. First up is whether you're able to sell your insect protein powder without regulatory approval yet, and where you are with that.
We can send some protein flour, so dried and deflated, but not post-processed. What is now authorized in the EU is whole insect and whole mealworms. So whether it's dried and deflated, that's something else, but not post-process.
Okay, so that's why there's been a prevalence of cereal bars and those types of products with whole insects in over the last sort of few years. And a question that came up from one of our other presenters that was one that was on my list was, what do you see, if you're going to list the most promising product applications, or give us the top 3 products where you see your products, your ingredient going in the future, what would they be from a consumer point of view, the top 3 consumer products?
I mean, maybe Ola, you want to comment because you might have a view on that. I will only comment on the food segment because the feed segment is already extremely well established. Fish feed, we cannot produce enough to satisfy the demand. Now the legislation just opened for pigs and chickens, so this is extremely well established. Now, if we take food, studies show that if the insect is invisible, acceptance from the public goes up to 60%. So I would bet rather on applications where the insect is not directly visible. In bars and snacks, that's very easy to produce. We've collaborated with Sulina to produce some meatballs. And of course, drinks. We have been in discussion with Food for Progress, the organization that has set up OOMF, because they see insect protein as one of the rebel strings to play on if you're young and want to consume differently. So I would bet on drinks, bars, and then meat analogs.
Excellent. No, well, thank you very much for that. I think to summarize your points there, Bertrand, we can confirm that insects do have legs then. And also, just as I put a poll out earlier because I was very interested in Ula's no-visit trials, and it would appear that 61% of our audience here believe that no-visit trials are the way forward. So I think that's a really positive move that you've been able to make there, and I think it's a good way of doing business going forward. I think if nothing else, we've learned a lot from the last 18 months. So thank you both for your time, and hope that you'll stay around to enjoy the rest of our presenters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
While Matt in the background does some magic to bring the new presenters up, I will start introducing. We have coming up now a team from Cargill who are going to be taking us through Dairy Alternatives 3.0 and how they're meeting the needs of flexitarians. We have a number on the Cargill team who are going to be presenting today. Matthias Bordeaux, who is the marketing manager for texturizers, Cargill starches, sweeteners and texturizers. Annie-Laure Rougier, who's a senior dairy technical specialist within the applications group at Cargill. Sebastian Barre, who is a business development manager on the hydrocolloid side. Mercedes Brigenti, a senior specialist in dairy applications. And they're going to be talking, about how the dairy alternatives market is growing and how that's meeting the needs of flexitarians. So I will hand you across to Matthias and Anne-Laure, and I look forward to hearing what they have to say.
Thank you, Steve. I'm just going to switch off my camera for a second.
I'll do the same.
And Anne-Laure, I'm so happy you're here.
You had some... Yeah, I'll speak later. Yeah, okay. Happy to.
So everyone can see my screen, I hope. So yeah, thank you for that very interesting topic we just discussed. So in terms of what we'd like to do in the next couple of minutes, Anne-Laure and myself is talk to you a little bit about what we've coined as Dairy Alternatives 3.0. And so Steve's already introduced our team here. It will be myself and Anne-Laure actually presenting, and then Mercedes and Sebastian will also be here to take on some questions and support us. Really, the idea is that we go through some of the consumer trends and how the bigger theme of plant popularity is shaping up and leading us to what we're calling Dairy Alternatives 3.0. And then we'll go into some of the formulation challenges, which Anne-Laure is going to talk to, into challenges of creating that sensational plant-based dairy experience that consumers are looking for. And we'll then show one of the many exciting concepts that we have to illustrate a little bit the solutions and the capabilities we have to support customers in catering to this market. Right. So let me kick it off with some markets and consumer data. I think it's clear to everyone that dairy alternatives are thriving, both in terms of value and volume. They've been growing quite rapidly in the past 10 years, and they're set to grow also in the coming 5 years. What you see here on screen is some data from Euromonitor, where you have plant-based alternatives to milk, yogurt, and ice cream. And according to Euromonitor, that market has now reached a 3.3 billion euro retail value in Europe in 2020, and is set to continue to grow at about 10% a year to then reach 5.3 billion euro in 2025. And that's roughly twice the value that Euromonitor has in its books for meat substitutes. So it's a very big market, it's a very profitable market, and it's a market with great future outlook. Now, we all know by now that in terms of the consumers consuming these products, it's not anymore about vegans and vegetarians, but it's about the flexitarians taking up the bulk, the bigger piece of that pie. There's some estimates that in some countries, up to 80% of all plant-based products are now consumed by flexitarians. I think what's really interesting is that those flexitarians, so consumers that make a conscious effort to increase their consumption of plant-based foods, there's a growing awareness also as a consumer that you are a flexitarian. Maybe they're not really calling themselves flexitarian, but at least the awareness that, I am doing this consciously, I'm really consuming more plant-based foods, is something that's growing, and it's something that's been growing quite rapidly, at least according to one consumer study, just in the past year, or at least in 2020. And I think that's something that's very interesting to see. So the relationship basically also with COVID and the growth of interest in plant-based foods is something that we're seeing come up quite strongly. So whether you're calling yourself flexitarian or not, I mean, more importantly, if you just ask the question, are you increasingly incorporating plant ingredients into your diet? There's a massive amount of consumers across Europe that are saying, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. And there's also a small, though substantial percentage of consumers that are saying, I'm willing to actually pay more for food and beverages that are plant-based. Now, that point may be a little bit more controversial because we have a little bit of conflicting messages from consumers as to the price of plant-based foods, with some consumers actually thinking they're priced too high. Nonetheless, the message here, so the interest in plant-based foods and ingredients keeps on growing. So what's also very interesting is how those flexitarians or consumers that are interested in plant-based foods, they really want to disassociate themselves from vegetarians and vegans, and also from vegetarian and vegan claims. And the industry is really playing on that. So if you look at the launches that have been out there in the European market in the past 5 years, we're seeing more and more that the actual claim plant-based is coming more and more to the forefront, as opposed to the vegetarian and vegan claim, which are being used less and less. There's still more products today on the market that have a vegetarian or vegan claim, but the growth in terms of the plant-based claim is quite amazing. Now, this is just one of the ways in which manufacturers are trying to gear their innovations towards the plant seekers. But we're also seeing that in terms of innovations, there are some mitigated successes, let's say. In fact, according to Innova data, and if you look at certain applications, we actually see for the first time in the year 2020 that there's been less innovations in plant-based alternatives to milk, as well as in plant-based alternatives to yogurt. So I think for some manufacturers already, as the market is maturing more, and even though it's still growing in terms of its volume and its value, to have new products on the market is not that easy. And we are seeing some companies starting to think about, rationalizing the offer that they have. So what then makes it really such a challenge? Well, we think it's really the fact that to attract those flexitarians, there's been a lot of play on health and nutrition, which needs to be the case and which needs to continue. But we're also seeing that choices for plant-based foods are driven by other elements such as taste, cost, sustainability, and also clean eating or label friendliness. So if you look here at a question which was asked to consumers that are choosing plant-based foods, what we see is that they mainly drive their choice for a plant-based food product based on the perception of health. But then immediately after that comes taste preference, and that's quite new. We didn't have this kind of very strong response on taste a couple of years back. So again, as the market is maturing, as consumers are thinking of those types of products being more mainstream, they really want to have something that tastes really, really good. What we've seen from some of the qualitative research, which we've done also at Cargill, is that whereas a couple of years back, it was really about, for virtually all of those flexitarians, it was about mimicking the real animal-based product, so mimicking the real dairy product. They were really looking for a taste profile that was similar to the original product, so to say. Now, consumers are actually looking for either something that does do that or something that's novel. So because it's all become a little bit more prevalent, the flexitarian is accepting something that tastes a little bit different, just because they know, okay, this is plant-based, and so I have a tolerance for the fact that it tastes differently. Having said that, it should still taste good, and it should still be exciting in terms of its texture. And then also, so the eating clean element here at the bottom of this graph is becoming more and more important, and it's driving more and more the choice that flexitarians are making when choosing between different products. So they're really scrutinizing that ingredient list more and more, again, as those products become more prevalent. And that's really something that's important in terms of driving their choice, as is the whole sustainability question, which is also coming even more to the fore than it was a couple of years ago. Now, on the other hand, of course, there are still the non-believers, and attracting them, so attracting those consumers that are not yet into plant-based foods is really the bigger challenge here. And there it's very clear that the doubts and what's holding those consumers back is nutritional content and processing, taste, and texture. So they're not too sure what's in them. They don't think they're really healthy. They're not sure they're giving them the same nutrition that animal-based products are. They think they're too processed. They don't think they taste as good. They don't like the texture. And also, they don't like the options that are being given to them. So they really like to see more options. So again, that talks to the same idea that it's really become something where, as a manufacturer, you need to play on many different fronts. On the nutrition, that's for sure. But you also need to play on the label. You need to have a story about the minimal processing of your product. And you need to have that taste and texture that is really appealing to consumers. So really, in order to get to that bright future for dairy alternatives, which is definitely going to work for the industry as a whole, but for an individual manufacturer to get there, it's really important to understand that we're now in this phase of dairy alternatives 3.0. And so what do we mean by that? Well, whereas the 1.0 was about getting to those lactose intolerant vegetarians and vegan consumers with mostly alternatives to dairy milk and very much focusing on a free from dairy claim. That's moved into the 2.0, where it's about the flexitarians. It's moved to a couple of more applications. And it was pretty much about improving the taste and texture and mimicking the real dairy experience. In terms of the claims, okay, it moved a little bit to plant-based. That is still happening, that is still going on. And there were some other sources other than soy that were being used, like oat, nuts, and pulses. The 3.0 really is going beyond that. And so beyond just the choice for not having dairy or just the idea of the popularity of plants, it's really now become a much more holistic proposal that you need to make towards consumers, and you really need to look at that holistic nutrition. So you can have a traditional texture, so mimicking that real dairy, but you can also bring something that's novel. But importantly, you really need to tell the whole nutrition story. So you could have, whereas in 2.0, you could have gotten away with a nutritional score which maybe wasn't that high, a low protein, a high fat. That's not something that's possible anymore. Now, it really needs to be something that is high in protein, low in fat, and that's label friendly. So you need to have ingredients that are familiar, and also preferably a good story around sustainability. Now, beyond that, there might also be a new trend coming up. We're already seeing it in the US today, which maybe we'll have to coin as Dairy Alternatives 4.0, and that's about hybrids between plants and animal proteins. So if you ask consumers what type of product would you prefer, we're actually seeing quite a strong acceptance for a mix of plant and animal based products, which, as I said, is something that's already happening in the US. We're just seeing a few products in Europe in that sense launching. But of course, it's very interesting from different perspectives. From a manufacturer point of view, of course, it's very interesting from a cost perspective. It's interesting because it's a little bit easier to get to that taste and texture profile that you want to get to. But you can still offer something, you know, that's a little bit higher in terms of expectations from those flexitarians versus the real dairy product. So it's a very interesting development. We're very curious to see how it's going to pan out in Europe. But for now, so we shouldn't maybe get too much ahead of ourselves. So looking at Dairy Alternatives 3.0, it's really bringing together different elements to respond to those flexitarian aspirations. It's about those flexitarians seeking goodness, seeking out foods that have specific health benefits. It's about them trying to avoid certain ingredients or certain elements, so there's a heightened scrutiny for ingredient labels. It's about a growing interest in the sustainability practices, so telling that sustainability story. And it's about looking for a sensational eating experience, whether that's something mimicking what you have in dairy or presenting something that's novel. And of course, all of that starts with the right ingredients. So having the ingredients that provide a nutritional balance, that are familiar to consumers, that are sourced sustainably, and that optimize taste and texture. Now, we will be going into how we at Cargill are trying our best to be the right ingredient partner for that. But before I go there, I'd like to hand it over to Anne-Laure, who's going to talk a little bit more at a technical level on the formulation challenges in creating those sensational plant-based dairy experiences that consumers are looking for. Anne-Laure, will you be presenting from your screen now?
Yes, I will share my screen. From my desktop. Just take it a moment. Here we go. Okay, so not sure you can see it.
Not yet. I'm not seeing anything on my screen.
Yes, can you see it now? Can you see it now?
No, not yet.
Okay. It's saying I'm sharing.
Yeah,
but,
you can see it now.
Okay, great. So let's put in a... So you see the presentation mode then?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so thank you, Matthias. So first, I will. So let's talk more about technique. So first, when we talk about dairy applications, we talk about a wide range of final products, having a pH from acidic to neutral, and textures from thin liquid to strong gel, and even frozen desserts. And for each sub-application, we have specific customer expectations. A nice mouthfeel, for instance, for the drinks, a thick and creamy dessert for creamy dessert, and a spreadable cream cheese, or creamy and smooth stirred yogurt. So each sub-application have specific consumer expectations. And as mentioned previously by Matthias, we'll have the same expectations for dairy alternative products, especially regarding texture. Let's focus first on dairy. If we want to understand the challenges we have to produce dairy alternative products, we need to keep in mind the properties of the medium we want to replace, and here is milk. After an homogenization step, dairy milk is a stable and homogeneous medium composed of water, of course, but also dairy proteins, fat, lactose, and salts, in particular calcium. So what I want to highlight here is that all those components, nutrients, are contained in milk. So milk is really an all-in-one medium, and it's its particularity. And each component will bring specific functionalities, emulsifying properties of the dairy proteins, and texturizing and nutritional properties brought by all of them. And right after, we can add texturizers, emulsifiers, and other ingredients in the formulation, and applying the adapted process to obtain the final product we really want to obtain: fermented milk, spreadable cheese, or whatever final products. So if we look into the details, on top of emulsifying properties, dairy proteins play an important role on texture by different ways, and in particular by their ability to bring texture by acidification, creating a lactic curd. It's really its particularity, and they can also interact with the texturizers. It's really used in dairy applications. Dairy fat has the ability to bring texture by the partial coalescence of fat globules. And something I really want to highlight also here, because the role of lactose is often minimized or forgotten even. But it's really important to take into account when we want to replace milk. It's because lactose plays a role and bring a dry matter and body in mouth. It's really key, and it's also the substrate for lactic culture. And it also plays a role in browning through Maillard reaction. In pizza cheese, for instance, it's where during the melting you can see the browning on the top. So it's something we are looking for as well. And calcium content is important to mention as well for nutrition, of course, but also for its indirect role and texture through interactions with some texturizers. And now, if we want to compare it with the dairy alternative products, a plant-based, so plant-based one, it's really a different medium in the way that plant-based alternative to milk is a reconstituted medium. So it's really key to have this in mind, because this medium is composed of water, one protein source. In general, it's one. You can see several as well. and vegetable fat. So it's separated ingredients. Then we can add texturizers, emulsifiers, and other ingredients, of course. And then we applied the adapted process to obtain the final product we want to obtain. So depending on the protein source and the process applied to extract them, the process is key as well in the functionalities of those proteins. And the type of fat used, several sources, we won't have the same functionalities and the same impact on taste and color. So each component has a role to play in this. So what is important to notice here is that plant-based products are often composed of one specific protein source, which is completely different from the fat source, which is different from dairy. And what we see on packaging is that the source of protein is well highlighted in the name of the products, and the fat source is only mentioned in the list of ingredients. So for instance, we see oat drinks or almond dessert. So it's really the protein source that is highlighted. As a plant-based source, we can find soy, almond, pea, potato, other sources. And depending on the protein's properties, we will have specific technical challenges and then solutions to provide. Because here the objective is to provide solutions to produce the plant-based alternative products. So first question is, do the proteins have emulsifying properties as the dairy proteins have? And if not, then it's not a problem. We have solutions, and if it's needed, then we can add emulsifiers. Do they bring texture by acidification? Can be also by eating or by other ways. And if not, it's possible to add texturizers like gelling agent or thickness. Do the protein interact with the texturizers to bring texture? If not, then we can increase the dosage of texturizers compared to dairy formulation, as we know that the dairy proteins have interactions with some texturizers, and really used, as I said previously. Other questions that that are key as well is, what is the solubility of those proteins, and in which conditions they are soluble, the organoleptic properties, the sensory profile and appearance, the nutritional characteristics with the amino acid profile, more and more important, and is there allergens? And something very important as well, and took into account for the new development, is what is this source of protein available and sustainable? Then we know how much texture we need to compensate and how. Same approach for the vegetable fat and oils. It can be coconut, palm, rapeseed, or other. And the same question as well, is it possible to texture with this fat source? What is the sensory profile? Is there allergens? What are the nutritional characteristics? So this point is more and more important to take into account. And is this fat source available and sustainable as well? And once again, then we know how much texture we need to compensate. So knowing that, we can select the type and the amount of texturizers and emulsifiers we need to use. For texturizers, we can use starches from different sources, pectins, seaweed extracts, for instance, and all those ones are vegetal texturizers coming from nature. And as an emulsifier, we can use lecithin or other emulsifiers. And of course, we can combine both. We can then adapt the formulation to reach the consumer expectations, as we saw previously. So we can also play on the process, of course. It's not mentioned here, but of course, we can always play on the process. And now let's practice with a concrete example with the stirred fermented products. plant-based one. So we want to develop here a plant-based specialty. So the challenge here is to achieve a similar nutritional texture profile than a fermented milk using plant-based ingredients. So we saw that it's not the same media. Here we see a classic recipe of stirred fermented milk with 3.2% fat and 3.3% proteins. So with proteins, as mentioned previously by Matthias, is key now. We are taking into account the nutritional values. We use in this recipe our Trillis AYS 0688 composed of cornstarch and pectin to enhance the texture brought by the lactic curd, get a smooth and creamy texture and control synergesis during shelf life. Here is the plant-based version. So for both recipes, the Nutri-Score is the same, and it's good since it's B. And if we compare the recipes in the plant-based version, we added a protein source coming from pea or Pure's P 870, having the ability to texture in acidic conditions. So we added also a fat source coming from coconut milk. We added also a calcium source for nutritional and also texture purpose, since we are using low methoxyl pectin in the Trillis product, so as a texturizer. So it's important to add as well. And we then adjust the texture by increasing the dosage of Trillis AYS 0688 to get a thick, smooth, and creamy texture. Then we developed this recipe applying the same process than a dairy fermented product. We enhanced the texture with the label-friendly texturizing solution to meet today's customer expectations. Maybe Matthias, you want to share your screen now to continue?
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Christelle. Sorry, we had some slides running through there. So hopefully everybody enjoyed the presentation by the team at Cargill. And I don't know if anybody else lost the sound towards the end there. I did. But
I did too.
Either, yeah, I did.
Okay, that's okay. I thought I was going mad as I went through all of my settings. Think I'd managed to turn the Cargill team off there. We've sort of ran over time a little bit there, so we've not really got any time for questions. And I know that there were a couple that were posted around the opportunities for developing the hybrid market, which is something that I'm sort of quite interested in as well. And also a question around which calcium salts are the best for producing plant-based yogurts. So if Kate and Catherine do sort of want to know more about those, then I'm sure we can facilitate a direct contact to the team at Cargill to answer those questions for you. So apologies we couldn't get to those with time and slight technical issues at the end there. Okay, right, so moving, I've now just got a message that's saying Matthias was on mute. So now moving on to the team from Biospringer, and a presentation around adding quality vegan protein using yeast protein. This is an ingredient I became familiar with about 6 months ago, and it's really sort of quite interesting. So I'm kind of keen to hear more about what's happening in this space at the moment. So again, we've got a team on standby from Biospringer. Quick introductions. We've got Daryl, who is their business manager at Biospringer, relatively new to the Biospringer EMEA team. Andrew Vecina, who is a food scientist with a real sort of focus on innovation, and part of the Biospringer US team in 2017, and then moving to France more recently to manage the culinary centre. We've got Benedict Peton, who is the marketing director for EMEA at Biospringer, who's been with Biospringer only 6 months now, since joining in December last year, with a long experience in the food industry with companies like Monin, Dole, and Elevia. And very, very passionate about food innovation and marketing. And then last but not least, we've got Christelle Moutaye-Migo, who is the marketing manager from Biospringer. But unlike some of the other team there, has been with Biospringer for 20 years now, and has been across the board in sales and quality, and now marketing as well. So has a real depth for the products at Biospringer. I'm now going to hand over to the team and leave them to introduce themselves and tell you about yeast protein.
Thanks, Steve, for that introduction. We're very excited to introduce our new yeast protein, which is a perfect solution for developing tasty and nutritious plant-based foods. Today, consumers are limiting their meat and dairy consumption due to various reasons, from health to animal welfare and sustainability. Food and beverage manufacturers are facing a real challenge in developing suitable animal-free products, which has to be tasty, nutritious, healthy, and with a limited impact on the environment. To answer this challenge, we have developed a yeast protein, which we will further explore. But first, I'll introduce the speakers today. As Steve said, my name is Daryl, and I'm the business manager for UK and Ireland, and I will further introduce Biospringer. Then Benedict, marketing director for EMEA, will first present the market trends, followed by Christelle, marketing manager for EMEA, who will explain in detail our solution, Springer Protissimo 101. And finally, Andrew, food scientist for EMEA, will explain how yeast protein is a great formulation tool for plant-based foods. Biospringer is a global producer of yeast ingredients with 8 manufacturing sites and 5 culinary centers, which enables us to respond quickly to our customers' needs. Our mission is to partner with customers to create innovative and natural origin ingredients from yeast fermentation which make food tastier and healthier while being reliable and respectful of the planet and people. We are part of Le Surf, a 165-year-old global supplier with a turnover exceeding 2 billion euros with more than 10,500 employees. 1 out of every 3 loaves of bread produced in the world are made using Le Surf yeast. The Le Surf fermentation know-how serves 4 business sectors with 10 business units which cover food, taste and pleasure, industrial biotechnology, healthcare and baking. I will now hand you over to Benedict, who will discuss the market trends.
Thank you, Daryl. After speaking about us, let's have a look now at the biggest market and consumer trends. According to Innova Market Insights, plant-based innovation is moving beyond established categories. The plant-based phenomenon is a consumer-driven trend that is ever evolving. This year's Innova number 2 trend is plant forward, which is a natural evolution of previous trend. In 2019, the plant kingdom, and then in 2020, the plant-based revolution. Indeed, people are more and more concerned about health and environment. That's why more and more are becoming flexitarian or sometimes vegan. You can see that plant-based innovation has continued to diversify across many areas of food and beverage, like snacks, probiotic drinks, egg and dairy alternative, and ready-to-eat meals. Here you can see the European plant-based market is leading the way in terms of plant-based claims. In Europe, for instance, 59% of lunch in 2020 had a plant-based or vegan claim. And the top 3 countries leading the plant-based movement are first UK, then France and Germany. Meanwhile, in the Middle East and Africa, the top 3 countries for meat-free innovation are South Africa, Turkey and Israel. Moving on now, we take a closer look at categories in the plant-based and vegan sectors. Here you can see that plant-based claim increased by categories for product launch. First one is cereal, then sport bars with the highest increase, plus 51%. The second highest increase is for meat and fish. And according to Innova Market Insight, there has been an 11% annual growth in food and beverage launches with a plant protein claim in Europe between 2016 and 2020. Lastly, it's interesting to understand what is driving this trend. When we ask consumers why they are eating plant-based alternative, the first reason is health for 60% of them. Indeed, they feel that eating less meat will support their immunity. And this is even stronger in Central and South America with 76% of people. The second reason, far behind, is animal welfare for 33% of interviewed people. And then the third one is the taste for 30 people. Sustainability is only the fourth reason with 27%. So considering all these trends, you can see that formulating plant-based food is a real challenge for industrial, as we have to take all those elements into account. I will let Christelle explain this deeper.
Thank you, Benedict. So the main formulation challenges are the following. We need to meet consumers' expectations while maintaining a good taste, good texture, and overall appearance of the products consumers are used to. What is the solution to these formulation challenges? The key is a protein-rich ingredient that will lack the troublesome off-notes that make many plant and animal proteins hard to ignore. I'll introduce Springer Proteissimo 101. It is the first clean-flavored vegan protein obtained from yeast fermentation. It allows producers to add good quality protein in vegan foods, but without bringing plant protein off-notes, such as earthy, beany, or starchy taste. What are the features and benefits of Springer Proteissimo 101? It has no flavor of notes, as we just said. It has a light beige color, meaning it has a minimal impact in the end product. It is GMO free, so it is not obtained from genetically modified raw materials. It is allergen free. It doesn't contain any allergens such as milk, gluten, or soy. It comes from fermentation, so it is environmentally friendly. It consumes low energy and water compared with animal-based proteins. It is vegan, as yeast is free from animal origin ingredients. And it has a good nutritional balance with a good composition in amino acid and a good digestibility. And overall, it is dispersible. Back in 2019, we had a survey conducted by Sky Consulting with about 3,000 consumers worldwide in Australia, France, Germany, UK, US, Japan, and China to understand what was the level of acceptance of yeast protein labeling. It turns out that 83% of adults consider that yeast protein is a good source of protein. What is the composition of Springer Proteissimo 101? It is more than 75% of proteins, less than 13% of lipids, and less than 5% of carbohydrates. I will leave the floor to my colleague Andrew, who will talk to you more about the product and then about its applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Christelle. Like Christelle just mentioned, Springer Proteissimo 101 is about 75% protein, but talking just about how much protein in there, we also want to talk about the type of protein. Springer Proteissimo is a complete protein, meaning it provides all the essential amino acids in sufficient quantity for a human healthy diet. Not all plant proteins are complete, and this makes it challenging to replace those typical protein sources in animal products that we think of, like burgers or cheese, which have the natural animal protein source. In addition, we talk about which amino acids are found in plant proteins. Certain ones can be more difficult to find, like lysine or some of the branched chain amino acids. Being based on yeast, we find high levels of these in addition to being a complete protein overall. When we talk about protein, not only is the composition of the protein important, but how well we can digest this protein and the body utilize it is important as well. We can look at this a couple different ways. Of course, the chemical score is just speaking about whether or not it's a complete protein. And then two different methods. We have done a test on using the PDCAS, which is the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, a method evaluating the protein based on both the requirements of humans and their ability to digest it, or a full 1, which is the maximum score, as scores and using this method are truncated to 1. We also could look at a DS score, which is the digestible indispensable amino acid score, which is more accurate as it specifically looks at the digestibility in the end of the small intestine. And this has no truncation, and we see we're a little bit over 1 at a 1.02. When we look at this in comparison to animal proteins, we fall, the full 1 is similar in the PDCAS and a DS. That puts us in the same range as those complete animal proteins with that really strong digestibility, which is important for protein consumption. Now we'll move on and we'll talk a little bit about the applications that we have done work on, and we see a lot of potential for our Springer Proteissimo 101. Some of the key main areas that we look at is to use this ingredient would be the meat analogs category, the cheese analogs category, cereals, cookies, pastries, and savory biscuits and snacks. We'll talk a little about the benefits and things like meat analogs. A lot of the challenges we see when formulating with plant-based proteins is going to be the taste. Christelle had mentioned there may be off notes like earthy, beany, or starchy. Some of these proteins can bring colors, sometimes particularly disturbing colors, with things like pea, which may be slightly green or yellow. Texture can be an issue as well, bringing grittiness or a lack of firmness in the structure of the product, as well as being bringing allergens or having that poor digestibility that we spoke about. Springer Portissimo 101 has a neutral flavor profile. No specific off notes to mention. It has a limited impact on the color of end products, particularly in meat-like applications, as the product is just a slight beige in color. We see an improvement in the texture as it gives a slightly more meat-like chew, holding a little bit of water. Of course, it has no allergens and is a great nutritionally balanced profile, as we just mentioned, it being complete as well as having a very high digestibility score. Here's an example where we used our Springer Portissimo 101 in a vegan Frankfurter sausage type application. Here we're using the product to boost the nutritional profile, as the other source of protein here would be the gluten, or here we're showing a comparison with pea protein. So, in comparison, we have a more complete, balanced protein profile and an overall great source. You talk about the benefits in cheese. We see a lot of similar elements that we see with the plant-based meat products. That neutral flavor profile being important, not having a grainy texture. Additionally, we see here it has some improvement in its ability to allow the cheese to melt more naturally. So cheese, of course, a lot of times is not just eaten plain, but used in other applications, paninis, pizzas, or just kind of having a nice melty cheese to make a sauce. And the ability for a lot of plant-based cheeses to melt is highly dependent on the protein source that's used. Portissimo 101 has a nice ability to help that process along. Here we're showing an example where we're increasing the nutritional profile of a soft herbed vegan type cheese. Think of something adjacent to a vegan Beurre type profile. And we're adding our Springer Portissimo 101 to have a really clean flavor profile, as opposed to something like pea protein, which may have some off notes, as well as keeping that cheese nice and smooth and soft. The next thing we'll talk about is in things like cereals, cookies, pastries. Again, the key here is going to be having that minimal impact on color and that really neutral flavor profile. A lot of these products are very clean and neutral in their profile, and we want to make sure we maintain that integrity of the sometimes sweet, balanced flavors. Here we've created a cereal bar, kind of a breakfast cereal bar that's high in protein, allowing it to be a source of protein. In this instance, we're comparing with pea. We have a really clean flavor profile that allows the flavor profile of the honey to really shine. The other thing we can talk about is savory biscuits or snacks. Again, we're really focusing on that clean flavor and that strong nutritional profile. We have a high protein wheat cracker where we've added Portissimo 101, allowing us to create an item that is considered a source of protein under the EU guidelines, using our Portissimo 101 without any adverse effects on the flavor or the texture. Other areas of interest could be things like pastas, again to bring that high source of protein without any off notes, or something like an extruded snack where we want to create a more healthy option. The Culinary Center team, both in EMEA and across the globe, are always developing new applications and looking to develop new ways to help customers understand how to use our product. We have a lot of application recipes available on demand for our customers to understand better our products and how we use them. In conclusion, Springer Portissimo 101 is a breakthrough innovation from Biospringer, really bringing that plant-based, complete protein with high digestibility with a clean flavor profile to help you with your plant-based application development. Please visit our website to download our white paper or ask for a sample at www.biospringer.com. Thank you. At this time, we'll move to the Q&A session if you haven't answered any of your questions.
Thank you for that, Andrew and Daryl and Christelle and Benedict. There have been no questions posted that I can see. Let me just check. No, there's been no questions posted, so I would encourage anybody who's sat at home. I know we've had an intensive hour and a half, but feel free to post those questions very quickly while we have got a few minutes. And thank you to Biospringer team there for keeping to time. One of the things I wanted to pick up on, and it came up in the presentation from the Cargill team earlier on about this hybrid space. And I think there's an interesting focus here that you have a lot more flexitarians and omnivores than you do pure vegans or vegetarians. So it was about this hybrid space and the idea of blending dairy with alternative milks. Is this something that you have considered or looked at with your Protissimo 101 and some of your meat analog products or your cheese analog products to say, well, actually, we can make an even better meat reduced product by making our frankfurters with Protissimo 101, but blending it with collagen, for example, to kind of really boost that protein, but also reduce the meat content and change that profile, but appeal to that wider audience? Is that a route that you see as important or have gone down?
So I'm going to answer. Yes, indeed, we focused on plant-based for the presentation, but indeed the product can be used in traditional products. So you can use it in standard nuggets or a hamburger. Any traditional food can be enriched with Protissimo, since you will bring only good proteins.
Okay, yeah. And we've got a question that's come in about how this ingredient is declared on the label. I know the answer to this, so I think it's actually a very exciting answer that you have. So the question is, how have you declared this on label, i.e. would it state plant protein or plant yeast protein? How is it labeled? So
its labeling is yeast protein in the European Union.
Which I think from a clean label perspective is a really, really positive labeling claim to be able to make something as simple and as clear as that. Because I think in this alternative protein space, there is a danger that the ingredients that we're posting aren't familiar, aren't recognizable. So I think a simple yeast protein claim is a very positive one. Has that been a difficult journey to go down to get that simple labeling, or have the EU been very positive and easy to overcome in achieving that?
It was quite easy, since yeast has a long history of use, and it's a safe product which has been used for centuries for brewing or for baking. And since we also produce yeast extract in active dried yeast and yeast-based flavors, it was just like an extension of our existing products. So we had no major issues.
Excellent. Very good. So are there any more questions from our audience here as we conclude this afternoon's session? We still have a moment or two. And just while we wait for any other questions coming in, if there are any, I would like to thank the Biospringer team for a very thorough presentation. And I would also like to thank our earlier presenters and the team from Cargill and the team from Tebrito and Tetrapak, and thank everybody for their attention this afternoon and joining these events. It is very difficult. I think it'll be nice when we can all get back in a room together. But these platforms are very effective at bringing us all together and allowing us all to connect and communicate. And hopefully next year we will be together again in a room, and I certainly will look forward to that. But thank you all for your time. Hopefully you'll all be joining the rest of the sessions later on this afternoon. I believe the next one starts at 2:15. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.